As Far as Anyone Knows is a mostly Latino history podcast where each week your hosts, Minerva Angeles
and Fredo B,
take turns sharing some Latino history,
bad jokes,
and ancestral love. Hello, and welcome to another episode of As Far as Anyone Knows. I'm your host, Minerva Angeles.
And I'm your co-host, Fredo B.
And we're here to tell you some stories. And today, we will be kicking off Women's History Month, even though it has been going on for over a week. We ran, we did like an extra week of Black History Month because it's a short month, and we just decided to change time or whatever. It's fine. So for Women's History Month, we are going to, you guessed it, discuss women. Oh, yeah. So this week, we're going to go over one of my faves. She's actually somebody I named one of our children after. And we're going to discuss Rigoberta Menchu. And
we named one of our children Rigoberta?
Okay. You know, as well as I do, that one of our children's middle name is Menchú, after this queen. And we'll get into her in a second. But just before we do that, do you want to tell us anything exciting, interesting, anything at all?
None of the above. But
oh, can't wait to hear about it then.
No, I was asked a question earlier this week, in the middle of the week, because there's this whole, on the internets, the youth, Gen Z.
The youths
is really coming for millennials with the tight skinny jeans and side part. I'm not really sure what they're wearing anymore. If it's not skinny jeans, I guess it's like straight leg or wide leg jeans.
And so, are you considering a side part?
No.
Okay.
But
and just for the audience here, because one, this is a podcast, so you can't see us, and two, because Fredo has not made his facial debut. Fredo doesn't have hair.
Yes, I am shaved bald.
Yes.
Anyway.
It's a beautiful bald head.
I have a glorious bald head.
It's glorious.
Not everybody can pull off this look.
You're right. It's not for everybody.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So Gen Z coming for ya with your skinny jeans and side parts.
I'm so surprised that it's an attack on women. Just really came out of left field. Didn't see it coming.
But I was asked, with all that talking about Gen Z and fashion and all that, I was asked the question earlier, like, oh, what's a fashion choice that you when you were younger that you look back now and you completely think, what the fuck was I thinking? And I want to pose that question to you. Okay. In thinking about your youth, looking back, were there some choices that you now look back and you kind of like cringe a little bit, or is it? I'll be very honest about me. I was never really fashionable.
Okay, that does not surprise me. Okay.
So I never followed trends like that too much. So there was never anything that I could look back and be like, oh, what the? People would look at, if you look at pictures of me younger, it's not that much different, except for a full set of hair. There really isn't much difference in terms of style-wise. I always had a preppy look for the most part in terms of I wore fitted clothes. I never was into the baggy jeans trend. I never wore the white tee that was 5 times the size I needed.
That was a good one.
I did experiment a little bit with a couple of things. I wore Converses for a period of time there, but that's about it. I don't think those are embarrassing. I don't look back and think those are embarrassing. If anything, they were uncomfortable. I'm calling out right now. Converses, they're uncomfortable.
Oh no, the Kamala fans are gonna come for you.
I'm not coming after. She could wear them. They look
I don't
nice
know
on
why
her.
she thinks they're comfortable, because you're right. Like, they do not, like, I don't know, whatever. I just have bad feet. But, like, I can't wear something like that.
No, it's like
that
wearing
doesn't have
chanclas outside.
Yeah, those are basically chancletas, like, with a, with a top.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
closed-toed chancleta.
I don't get it.
But anyway, that's all to say that I was never really, again, I was never on trend with any of the fashion, so I don't have that to look back on and be like, oh man, look at that. That's a time of the sign of the times, right? It's very much like, oh, okay, he's wearing a cardigan.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's funny because you're right. Like, I know pictures of you, like, when you were younger versus now. I mean, it might as well be the same cardigan if we're going to go there.
It might be.
Yeah. So, good for you. I will say I'm generally, like, super proud of any fashion moment I ever had, because I always feel like, for the most part, like, I tried to wear stuff I liked, and it's not like I would wear anything I liked, in 2004 today. I will say, if there's anything that I am, I'm just, like, glad that's over, I would say low-rise jeans.
I don't know why anybody thought those were like a good idea.
No, I mean, they're like, so this is like mad dated because it's definitely like 2001 or something, but like Maya to me is, as far as I'm concerned, in my recollection of.
Could you explain who Maya is for those who might not know?
I don't even know. How do I explain who Maya is? Do I say like a song? Like, they're not even gonna know the music. If you don't know who Maya is, you don't know who Maya is.
So Maya was an R&B artist from the late 90s, early 2000s. She was pretty successful. Yes,
very successful. She was even on the Rugrats movie soundtrack, which was kind of a big deal.
With Blackstreet, right?
Yes, it was lit. I was very excited for them. All of them.
Rugrats was a cartoon that played in the mid-90s to the early 2000s on Nickelodeon.
You see what I'm saying? It's too much. It's too much. If we have to explain it, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But I remember, like, Maya had, on one of her videos, she had, like, I don't know if it was her that came out with, like, the first one that I saw, but it's, to me, this image of her in it was probably my most vivid memory of when I thought it was cool, and I was probably, like, my body type was always different from Maya's a very skinny person, and I probably was never, like, super, super skinny, but I was skinny at the time. I was the skinniest I probably have ever been at the time. And so I did wear skinny jeans, not just skinny jeans, low-rise skinny jeans. And, it was just ridiculous because your butt crack showed. And it was designed to have your butt crack show.
Well, you were supposed to have the whale tail, the thong.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're supposed to have.
Thank you, Cisco.
Thank you, Cisco, for that. The thong song, which, again, no one, Google that.
Depends on listening.
But, like, I don't know. I think, like, so if you had a show that was supposed to be trashy, but this is just the oppressive nature of, like, being a woman in general. It's like, well, if you want to be in style, you have to wear the low-rise jeans. However, and the low-rise jeans are, of course, designed to show your underwear. However, if you do show your underwear...
Whore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is the dilemma you were constantly in. So the idea for me anyway was that I would have to figure out how to wear a shirt that was long enough to cover the crack for the most part. But that created my least favorite comment on women's bodies during this, early 2000s time, where if a woman would bend over and her crack showed, the inevitable crack is whack commentary. Hey, Minerva, crack is whack.
Crack is whack.
So annoying. So, yeah, I mean, I don't regret it because it was, I did what I did during the time.
But I think you couldn't really buy jeans that were
like that's what I'm saying. Like that's what was available,
Yeah.
and I looked good, and I don't care because it was the time, and I felt like good about my choice at the time. I feel it was great.
It was like
It's good to think about when you go
how
back.
happy are you that like mom jeans,
Oh,
high rise jeans?
Let me tell you
fashion?
something about these high rise jeans. Woo. High-rise jeans is the best thing that happened to all of us. And, you know, I don't know that anyone has anything negative to say about high-rise jeans because they really are something special. And you're welcome. Also, thank you to whoever figured that out because I'm not going to take credit for that. I just am happy to be riding this wave right now.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, the real winners here are leggings. The real winners in life are leggings because they give you the same feel of high-rise jeans, but they're even more flexible. So, yeah.
So let me ask you: did you ever wear because that's interesting because that you wore the low-rise jeans, but like do you also found a very long shirt? Because I remember the trend was like not like a crop top, but like shirts were made even smaller back then.
You know, there were crop tops
because you were supposed to wear some midriffs, if I'm remember correctly.
I mean, that was like what was on TV, but like, yeah, of course, women did that if they felt comfortable doing that. I was just never the type of person who felt comfortable showing off my midsection. Even at my skinniest, I like wore tankinis, and it's just so funny now that I look back at it because. You know, it's that meme of like, I wish I was as fat as the first time I thought I was fat.
Yeah.
And it's like all these awful body image issues that we have because of, you know, the world. And anyone out there, I mean, you're just also lucky you're in a time now where we're like, you can rock your clothes however you want and like whatever. And like, obviously you can still feel uncomfortable if you want to. It's your body. It's how you want to present yourself. But it's just a nicer time when people are being just slightly nicer. There's still mixed messages. It's still not, we still have a lot of work to do, but it's slightly better to have a body and be a woman right now.
So let me ask you, did you ever wear like, cause it was a trend too. Did you ever wear, like, I don't think we called them bell bottoms, but they were like wide leg.
Yeah, of course.
Were they called bell bottoms, or we just called them like wide leg? I
mean, they like I guess the official term when you went to Gap, they were the flared jeans.
Because bell bottoms were not cool, but flared jeans.
Nah, we called them bell bottoms.
Really?
I mean, I don't know if that's like elsewhere they were just called flared, whatever. But like where in Queens,
I just called them.
They were bell bottoms.
And did you constantly step on them?
Yes. Yes. And the backs of them were disgusting.
Well, always ripped, yeah.
Yeah. That was not great. That was not great.
Yeah, because like for men, we didn't wear bell bottoms, but we wore boot cut. But boot cut with sneakers just doesn't make any sense because they're always going to like go underneath your sneaker. And some guys got creative and were able to like cuff their pants in a way that I was never able to cuff my pants in a way that stood cuffed. They would always like drag even further down. And forget about it. If it was a rainy day, it would drag even further.
Yeah. The rainy days were nasty. Yeah, it was gross.
Yeah.
It was gross. Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's terrible because it's like awkward kids, you know, not knowing any better about how to like get their clothes like adjusted.
Hemmed.
You know what I mean? And it's not like we weren't in like the socioeconomic status where that was a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I did know people that definitely got like their clothes hemmed or had like a relative that could do that for them, but that just wasn't my situation. So there was so much I just didn't know about like the hem and all that. Like
I mean, really my mom used to be able to hem my jeans, but she would and then she would turn them into high waters, bro. And then I'm just like, nah, I'd rather just. So, did you also wear? Because I'm trying to remember now the style of the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. Did you wear the dark lip liner?
Of course I did. Okay. Dark lip liner, clear gloss, baby. You couldn't tell me nothing.
And you gelled down your baby hairs.
Of course I gelled down my baby hairs. Nah, and my cowlick. Girl, you can tell me nothing was my cowlick. So a cowlick, I don't even know where that came from. The only thing I can think of is like just like from my understanding of it when it was explained to me, it was just more people understanding like a cow, like what it would potentially look like if a cow licked your head in a direction.
Yeah, so it'd be like your not a it wasn't your bang, but like it was like a whole section of your
No,
hair,
you
just
would
like kind of
do
like
your side part because hello side part,
part.
and you would swoop your hair a little bit or a lot and gel
Just
that
gel that
motherfucker
motherfucker down.
down,
Yeah, that
okay?
hair wasn't going
And it
anywhere.
wasn't going anywhere. And then you would do your baby hairs. And I always had a problem with my baby hairs because I am kind of like a little bit on brand with like the Latina look when it comes to my baby hairs, and my baby hairs are like mad long. So I definitely had the type of baby hairs that could potentially look like bangs. So I had to be like really strategic on how I used to lay them, because I would have to lay them and then like and move them to the side and then curl them down my sideburn so that sort of by my cheek area that it would curl.
Okay, yeah.
It would look
I know what you're
amazing.
talking
Oh
about.
my god, those were the days. So good. Today we will be discussing Rigoberta Menchu. And Rigoberta Menchu was born on January 9th, 1959, to a poor native family and was raised Quiche, which is a branch of Mayan culture. And this branch of Mayan culture, where she is from, is in Guatemala. And she turns out to be an activist and a Nobel Peace Prize winner. So I can't wait to tell you how she got there. Albeit without, of course, with a ton of tragedy tied to it, unfortunately. But her perseverance is incredibly inspiring. So in her early years, she helped the family with farm work, either in the northern highlands where her family lived, or in the Pacific coast where both adults and children went to pick coffee on big plantations. As far as Rigoberta can remember, her life has been split between the highlands of Guatemala, known as the Altiplano, and the low country plantations or fincas. Each year, she and her family spent about 8 months on the fincas working for Ladinos, which are Guatemalans of Spanish descent, understanding that these are probably just like white Europeans that settled in Guatemala and have, I guess, been there for centuries.
Ladino with a D, right?
With a D, Ladinos.
Yeah. Okay.
So starvation and malnutrition were constants on La Finca, and natives are routinely sprayed with pesticides, which is obviously completely inhumane and unacceptable. When they're not working, they're in their small village, and that's where they call home. And in the deeply wooded Altiplano, Rigoberta's life centers around ceremonies and traditions of her community, the Mayan community. At the fincas, she and her people struggle to survive in cramped, miserable conditions at the mercy of wealthy landowners and their overseers. And so we see here, when we use the term overseers, that they're obviously keeping, this is, well into the 60s, keeping the structures of a plantation and the slave-like conditions very much alive. And in this case, the Mayan people are the ones suffering as workers on this land. So they move between the two worlds each year in a truck covered with tarp. And by the time she's about 8, she's already a hard worker, and she's capable of picking several pounds of coffee a day. The conditions are so bad at La Finca that her brother dies of malnutrition, her youngest brother. So that's her first family member that she experiences the tragedy of death with. So I'm going to take a cut a little bit, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what else is going on. So we're sort of laying the framework down for what's going on these plantations, what's going on in her day-to-day life, and really sort of forming this understanding of of the injustices that Native people have to deal with in Guatemala. And now we're going to cut to sort of overarching stuff that's going on with the government that directly and indirectly affects the Mayans. So this is post World War II, and we have President Jacobo Arbenz, and he is trying to just sort of fight for the people, trying to, make Guatemala a self-sustaining state, and, just trying to, help some underprivileged people there and stuff like that, right? So, where I'm getting this information from, also, by the way, is what I'm about to share with you. I pulled from Harvest of Empire, which is an incredible book. And what I pulled here was from the movie that's available on YouTube. And I'm going to share that link in the episode notes. I highly, highly recommend this movie in general. And the book, it's incredibly informative, and it really talks, the purpose of it is really to talk about the relationship between the U.S. and all of Latin America, and the impact that the U.S. has had on these countries, various countries, and just the violence that this relationship has caused, and the civil wars that it has started within many, many, many Latin American countries, and how this has had a direct impact on immigration to the United States from the various Latin American countries. And what it does beautifully is that it aligns these events that happen with immigration trends from a particular country to the United States, very much following the beginning of the U.S. involvement in that country. And then it also kind of highlights sometimes when the U.S. decides it's going to oh, you know what? We're just going to create pathways to citizenships for these people because we did something terrible to them. Sound familiar? Anyway, so in Harvest of Empire, what they go into here is how there are former CIA agents that actually go on record and are interviewed not only for the book but for the movie, and they discuss plans to overthrow this progressive government in Guatemala in an effort to increase profits from American countries that are in Guatemala. And really, the strategy was taken for all of Latin America, but in this particular example, we're just going to talk about how it affected Guatemala. Please watch the movie to see how it affected various countries. So from about 1954, Latin America had become the incubator for all great U.S. companies. That was the quote directly from them. And the CIA actually employed local proxies and operatives to destabilize the government. They funded revolts. They provided guns and actually trained Guatemalan death squads. At this point, they have successfully taken this government down, and you can see news reports showing the President Nixon taking pictures with other leaders that America has absolutely influenced to put into power, and the media is calling this campaign for America's involvement as a way for America to stop communism from spreading in the New World. Again, does that sound familiar? So in this way, this is interesting because it's still being called the New World, and this is well into the 1960s, and we know that this is not the New World at this point. But what we're hearing is, again, the problem. We've talked about this a couple times, but we're hearing the propaganda, the idea of manifest destiny, right? The idea that the United States has some kind of, obligation to just continue to help this land, this native land that belongs to the tribes that were here before they were, attempted genocide on. And they, are being basically sold. They're basically selling us a story. And the story is we're helping. This is, the white man's burden. And we all know this from school. This is what we've been taught, that this involvement is only to help people, when really we have CIA agents on the record communicating that this was a strategic plan in place specifically to help U.S. companies thrive and not have to deal with penalties of law in these countries, and essentially enact what we know as neo-colonialism, which is to colonize these other countries in the form of capitalism, or in the name of capitalism. So at this point, we basically have a full-on civil war, guerrilla war in effect in Guatemala. And rebels have retreated into the mountains. They're now recruiting Mayans, who are essentially an incredibly easy target at this point because, as we've already laid down the framework for, they've always been discriminated against by the government, whether the government was the colonizer at the time, Spain, or whoever was sort of, elected, or quote unquote elected over time. We all know that, a lot of our societies have been structured to, put down a lot of our indigenous ancestors or our indigenous living people. And we know that, that also happens for our black, ancestors and our black people that are there.
I think it's so crazy for me to hear that, centuries later, they're still being essentially taken advantage of. Is in particular because in Guatemala, the people, as of the last census, in terms of the Mayan people, they were the second largest population in Guatemala. Mm-hmm. So first was people who identified as Ladino or Mestizo, which I think those numbers may be skewed in terms of like who is mm-hmm. that. And then after that is the Mayan people. Mm-hmm. So all the indigenous people. So like you're talking about nearly something like 40 in the 40 percentile of everybody in Guatemala. This is a group of people that are around 17 million people, right? So 40% of 17 million people, mm-hmm. almost half of the country identifies as indigenous, mm-hmm, as mm-hmm. a direct descendant of the Mayan ancestry. Mm-hmm. So I think it's insane that they're still being taken advantage of when they have the manpower, they have the numbers. Mm-hmm. And again, just goes to show what like white supremacy really does to oppress people, even when they have the numbers to have a voice. Yeah. And I a little bit that you said, something that you said earlier, in terms of I want to just kind of drive drive it home, is about manifest destiny, because we do talk about that. This is something that's talked about in history class, right? But really, it's only talked about in the sense of moving westward, right? So manifest destiny, the idea that the United States was here to kind of oversee the entire continent, or from coast to coast. But we're not talking about just the United States. We're talking about the entire hemisphere. Manifest destiny was really the idea that the United States staked claim to the entire hemisphere. So with the exception of Canada, I guess, they really were working their way down. So if you take a look at what was going on in Guatemala, a lot of that stuff was also happening in parts of Central America, South America, the Caribbean. Things were going on with U.S. involvement in those places because they they felt that they were stakeholders in these places because they wanted them, right?
Mm.
You could say all you want that it was because they were trying to uphold and keep back the, the communists, but really, as you pointed to, it was about capitalism and really taking that land for them.
Mm-hmm. One of the companies that they discuss in the film is something like U.S. Fruits or something like that. I don't even remember. I'll confirm that in the notes. But they had owned something like 60 plus acres of land in Guatemala, and that's where they were producing all these fruits. And there's all these images of Guatemalan workers, presumably many of them Mayan, loading up trucks and cutting down bananas and all this other stuff. And we really take for granted how much of this stuff is A, slave labor, and B, really an abuse of power of the United States just going into other countries and being able to, essentially steal land and steal labor and be able to produce millions upon billions and billions of dollars for themselves at the sacrifice of these people. And they're going to continue to push policy and propaganda that's going to allow them to continue these atrocities against humanity. That's what they are. And it's very unfortunate. A lot, I can't watch a lot of this stuff without drawing lines to today, to kids in cages, to whatever is going on with this asylum thing. Now, at this point, it's, it definitely is a brand of is a real brand of inhumanity when we remove the option for people to even apply for asylum. But at the end of this segment, when they were talking about Guatemala in the 60s, they said there was like a huge number of Guatemalan people that had applied for asylum in the United States in the 60s, and only 2% of the applicants were granted asylum. And this was, directly a result of the United States input and, the United States involvement in their country's civil war. I mean, it's absolutely unacceptable. And so, we see this time and again, and then there's women like this. So before I get into my own rant, let me get into why she's so awesome. So, at this point, because of all the things we just said, Rigoberta Menchu soon becomes involved in social reform activities through the Catholic Church. She became prominent in the women's rights movement when she's only a teenager. This aroused considerable opposition in influential circles, especially after a guerrilla organization established itself in the area. The Menchú family was accused of taking part in guerrilla activities, and Rigoberta's father, Vicente, was imprisoned and tortured for allegedly having participated in the execution of a local plantation owner. After his release, which his family fought for tirelessly, he joined the recently founded Committee of the Peasant Union, which is called the CUC, and I'm assuming that's just a translation of it into Spanish. So in 1979, Rigoberta also joined the CUC. So this is when she's a little bit older. And that year, her brother was arrested, tortured, and killed by the army. His name was Petrocinio, and he was kidnapped and burned alive while Rigoberta's entire family and village were forced to watch. And I wanted to do a quick callback as we talk about this, because we had mentioned, I think this was episode 1 when we had talked about Tupac Amaru II. And this was Incan, right? This is the Incan Revolution. This was in Peru. Mm. And we're talking about the year 1780, where the tactic was used that he had to watch his family get executed. Before he was executed, his tongue was cut off. He was attempted to be quartered, which was, where they tried to pull apart his limbs. Please listen to episode 1 for more details on that. And when that didn't work, they proceeded with hanging him. This is,
Incredibly
incredibly,
years later.
yeah. This is inhumane, right? This is literally 200, a whole 200 years later, because this was exact. Her brother was executed in 1979, and this happened 200 years prior, and we see the same tactics. The entire family was made to watch this person be burned alive, and with the intention, it's an age old colonizer move of making an example out of someone, and we are made to watch this person be tortured and burned alive as an example, so that we are put into fear to just not do that too. And what I want to say about that is that we are descendants of survivors, right? But what I think is sort of relevant to bring up a lot is that we have inherited the passed down trauma of people that had to watch people like them and people they were related to tortured and murdered in large groups like this, and made examples of. And then we've had to live through iterations of this in our school systems and whatever's of that kind of continued practice. And what it does to our psyche and what it does to our development, I think, is really important to acknowledge. And so when we sit here and we deal with imposter syndrome or whatever new age version of sort of having to deal with your inability to thrive or move forward, there's a lot systematically at play that physically won't let us get there. And then there's the stuff internally, the stuff we have to heal that our ancestors had to live through. So I just thought it was really important to just bring that up for a second, because this is by design, a lot of what we have to survive and get past. So, or not get past, what we have to heal. So, it's just important to remember that, and I wanted to make sure we made space for it. So then the year after that, her father was killed, and that this is when security forces in the capital stormed the Spanish embassy. And to be clear, they show this in the movie as well. Her father sought asylum in the Spanish embassy. He went into a government space that you would think is supposed to be some kind of asylum, where you think that there's a sanctuary there, and he and some college students and other activists and protesters ran into this space to try to evade being murdered. And this security force, which is the government, proceeded to burn that building down, and everyone in that building died. And it was an incredibly sad thing to watch. And I remember the first time I watched it, I was actually in a group of people. It was like a work conference thing, and I remember watching it and thinking, how am I not supposed to be crying right now? This is I know I'm supposed to be professional, but it shouldn't. This does not compute. This is an inhumane thing to have to watch, and there's other bystanders there just trying to get help, and they're being burned alive. Somebody has to do something, and they're trying to hose the area down, but it was too late. It was just awful, just an awful way to die, and completely inhumane. And I just thought it was very demonstrative of what it's like to be in a war-torn, civil war torn country, and what a lot of people don't understand about what a lot of Latino Americans are dealing with, and what they're escaping from when they do try to access the United States physically. So if anyone listening has any doubts about what people are trying to get away from, please watch Harvest of Empire. So shortly afterward, and this continues to get sadder and sadder, so I'm so sorry I'm continuing to spread this, share more of it, but shortly afterward, her mother also dies after she is arrested, tortured, and raped. So, at this point, she knows that her family is being really looked for at this point. Now, several of her family members have been murdered by the government or by any sort of guerrilla militia. So she's becoming now increasingly active in the CUC, and she taught herself Spanish. She taught herself other Mayan languages outside of her native Quiche. So in 1980, she figured prominently in a strike at the CUC, or that the CUC organized for better conditions for farm workers in the Pacific Coast. And on May 1st, 1981, she was active in large demonstrations in the capital. She joined the radical 31st of January Popular Front, in which her contribution chiefly consisted of educating the native peasant population in resistance to massive military oppression. And in 1981, she had to go in hiding in Guatemala, and she essentially fled to Mexico at this point because it was no longer safe for her to be in Guatemala with all the death threats she was receiving. This marked the beginning of a new phase of her life, and she had to now be an organizer abroad, and she had to resist the oppression in Guatemala and the struggle for Indian peasant people's rights from afar. So in 1982, she took part in the founding of a joint opposition body, the United Representation of Guatemalan Oppression, which is the RUOG, and which of course is probably the RUOG in Spanish, not the same order that we said in English, similar to the CUC. And in 1983, she told her life story to Elisabeth Burgos-Debray, and the resulting book in English called I, Rigoberta Menchu, is a gripping human document which attracted considerable international attention and is also a source that we use today. In 1986, she became a member of the National Coordinating Committee of the CUC, and the following year she performed as a narrator in an important film called When the Mountains Tremble, about the struggles and sufferings of the Maya people. On at least 3 occasions, Rigoberta Menchu has returned to Guatemala to plead the cause of the Indian peasants, but death threats have forced her to return to exile. Over the years, Rigoberta Menchu has become widely known as a leading advocate for native rights and ethnocultural reconciliation, not only in Guatemala, but in the Western Hemisphere generally, and her work has earned her several international awards, including a Nobel Peace Prize in 1992. Her sisters actually stayed in Guatemala, and they joined the guerrilla army, and her choice was, of course, to take that diplomatic route. As we've seen, she's accomplished an incredible amount of work and joining many organizations and leading many organizations through this advocacy. And she wants to basically tell her story, the story of her people, and put legislation into place as a way of furthering the rights of natives. And that is the story of Rigoberta Menchu.
It's an incredible story. Like, when you just, especially when you put it back to back, these are just kind of the highlights, right? Or as much as it could be called highlights, right? Because it's all really sad. But it also, because you have your brother is killed, your father is killed, your mother is killed, you lose your home, you have to go flee into exile. This would break most people. Most people,
It has.
Yeah. If you were an X-Men, you'd have a hex going on in the town. Shout out to WandaVision. But
this show can't be about WandaVision.
But the fact that she persevered, she continued to fight, and kudos to her for taking that diplomatic route, right? Because I don't know, I'm not sure if I would have I don't know if I would have taken that approach. I may have gone with her
where
sister.
Her sisters and
But it's amazing to hear her story, and the fact that she is still out there doing this work, bringing to light the injustices that are going on, not just in Guatemala, but throughout all over the world. Really, she's fighting for all indigenous people. She's definitely somebody that I'm glad that we were able to talk to her about her on this podcast.
Mm-hmm. And she's still alive, and she's still doing this work. So she is, she's an incredible force, and I feel grateful to know about her and to know her story and to be able to tell her story. And I hope that it inspires anyone here listening to just, fight your fight, whatever your fight is, She comes from a line of really strong people, and I just, I find her incredibly inspirational. I named a whole baby after her. So, happy Women's History Month. I think we started off with a great leader, and we hope to show you some more.
Yep.
That's all for today, folks.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening.
Ha-home. See you soon. Follow us on social media. You can follow our podcast at AFACPod. That's at AFAAK Pod. Or follow our hosts, Minerva at It's Minerva Angel and at Fredo_B on Twitter.